The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is sponsored by Two Fat Lardies, Firestorm Games, and the generous donations of you, the listener. Thank you to everyone for your continued support. We really do appreciate it. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast, episode 271. Kings of War. With hosts Neil Shuck and Mike Hobbs, and guest George Holt. This show was recorded on the 19th of June, 2019. Hello and welcome to another Meeples and Miniatures podcast. 'Tis I, Neil. I am joined once again by my partner in crime. It is, of course, the Welsh Wizard himself, Mr. Hobbs.
So, Mr. Shuck, what's happened to the Brumley Dwarf? Has he been retired? Have you been hit by a copyright infringement? Have you finally grown out of it?
I don't know. I'm just...
You're just not feeling dwarfish tonight, are you?
Not particularly.
You're not channeling your inner dwarf.
Maybe not. However, I am channeling my inner Midlander because I am joined by a fellow Midlander this evening. As we have, this is another show where we are joined by one of our very kind and generous patrons. For this quarter, we have a certain Mr. George Holt who drew the short straw, and is joining us this evening. Hello, George. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Neil. Hello, Mike. It's a pleasure to be invited on. I feel incredibly lucky to have won.
Well, you say that now.
Indeed.
Last year, get it 2 hours.
Yeah, welcome to the show, mate. Good to speak to you. And as a listener to the show, you know what's coming next, don't you? Okay, so since George is his first time appearing on the show, we have a tradition with our guests that the first thing we find out from them is how on earth they got into the tabletop gaming hobby. So, George, how on earth did you get into tabletop gaming?
All right, let me just consult my notes.
Notes?
Notes?
Good grief.
I think it's might be a generational thing because I was introduced to wargaming via Games Workshop and Warhammer.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. A friend of mine was playing at school, and he got me into it. I started with Chaos Warriors, who are nice and spiky.
Skulls. I love skulls. I love a good skull.
Okay. So just to put this into context, what version of Warhammer was this?
I'm glad you asked, actually. This was just at the end of 5th edition and the start of 6th, so just before one of the red books came out.
Okay, so this is after the first big box, isn't it?
Yes.
Right, cool. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. And Chaos Warriors. That was a good one. Mixed Chaos, or did you just stick to one of the 4 main gods?
I think I did Khorne initially. You know, I never really differentiated too much because I never had enough money to buy too many of the champion models by the time I was getting real pocket money.
Yeah. Classic miniatures. I think I've still got a few of those hanging around somewhere in my lead pile.
You shock me.
Do I really?
Not.
No.
Anyway, sorry, George, for that interruption.
That's all right.
Please carry on.
After that, I got really into sort of the Games Workshop side of the hobby. I dabbled in 40k, got some Imperial Guard, got a lot of Imperial Guard, and specialist games, which I'm still interested in, although I haven't played in years. But then, as a lot of people, I sort of fell out of love with it before I went to university. I think it was the 40k, to be honest. I'm not keen on it. I think it's the scale mismatch that doesn't quite gel with the it's the model scale and the ground scale.
Yeah.
Not being it's a bit breaks the immersion.
Yeah.
Because you need 28mm artillery pieces on a 6 foot wide table.
Yeah, indirect fire. It's a bit too close.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, after university, I was contacted by my old school teacher who wanted to get into wargaming, and this sort of piqued my interest. So I went up to the attic and had a look through all the old models, and I think that that just awakened the sleeping dragon. So I got some of the vast unpainted collection together, and I managed to find the Kings of War rules. Awkward segue. Online, right. And so one of my first games was actually a Kings of War game to introduce a friend to wargaming.
Yeah. So had you played much Kings of War before?
No, never. This is the first time I played. I just found the free rules on the internet, and I liked them because they were a lot less complicated than Warhammer 6th edition.
So what happened after that then?
I really caught the bug again. Looking at sort of the range of models available, I got into historicals, especially like Normans. So yeah. I got the Conquest Games classics. They're really nice, and a few Perry Crusaders as well.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and then I got Butterfly Disease.
Yeah, as we do. Yeah,
yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and now I've got an enormous pile of models that I'm hopefully going to paint at some point. Hope springs eternal, right?
Yeah. I'd like to think that one day you'll get round to it. It's more of an investment.
Yeah, I mean, if metal prices rise.
Yeah.
This is it. Yeah, just think of the... be inspired by what happened to my Norman plastics at the start of the year. And that's kicked off a new painting renaissance. So, you never know. Okay, so other than Normans, then, what you when you say that started a bit of a butterfly thing, what's kind of happened? Where have you ended up?
A lot of places.
Yeah,
I've got a pile of battle mechs, some of which are again painted, and a lot of which aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got into Chain of Command as well, although that was helpful because my parents had got me some of the Airfix 8th Army and Africa Corps when I was younger, and I think they are some of the best Airfix kits, which was very fortuitous, seeing as I've got a 20mm Chain of Command army for less than I would normally have to.
Yeah.
I say less because obviously the temptation to buy a few extra models, just to liven it up a bit, is always great.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah. I was inspired by your epic extravaganza to make quite a lot of purchases off eBay, and again they're now languishing in a pile somewhere, and I'm sure I'll get to painted eventually.
Sorry, George.
Yeah.
It's all right. I'd probably have, it was inevitable, really.
Indeed. If you listen to us, epic is always inevitable. So what sort of rules are you using for the historicals? You mentioned the Normans and stuff.
The only set of historicals I've really used is Lion Rampant. I think I quite like the. I think the scale does match the period quite well because, from my basic understanding of medieval military history, big pitched battles were quite rare, and so it would have been mostly more a skirmish scale, which is what Lion Rampant is. And again, I played the game, and it's a good fun, solid game. I've also been lucky enough to play Pikeman's Laments, the pike and shot variant, with a friend of my teachers at I think the Rollsoul War Games Club. And again, that works very well. Actually, it's a good game. I've been looking to sort of try and find some big battle rules. I bought Swordpoint, and they are very nice, but I've not found anyone to play. And I think you recently with your Greeks episode, you hit the nail on the head by pointing out that when you do a set of rules that covers 3,000 years of history from the Bronze Age to gunpowder, you really sort of lose out on the period details, which really which I think is the most important thing to capture in a war game very often. So, when you mentioned Hoplomachus, was it?
Yeah, Hoplomachus.
Yes, thanks. I've got some Greeks as well, which turned up. So,
what's that turned up? I mean, recently?
Oh no. I got these when Warlord a few years ago when Warlord had an introductory offer on what's their Hail Caesar? That's it.
Oh,
a game which I've also never played, but I got a box of their plastic hoplites.
Right, cool.
Yeah, so they're based 4 to a 40mm square base. I reckon I've got just enough for a very small game of Hoplomachia.
Cool.
And I've also
Did Warlord do their own hoplites, or are these just rebranded Victrix?
No, they're their own.
Oh, they did their own, did they?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I think they're rebranded. I think it was Immortal Miniatures, the original brand, but I think they bought them quite a while ago.
Right,
Immortal did the earlier ones. They did the biblical, the Assyrians and stuff. Could be wrong though. Yeah, I've looked at the Warlords hoplites and they are quite nice.
Yeah, I'm quite fond of them. Although, yeah, I've got the ancient set because it contains 2 more models than the classical set.
Even better.
Mm-hmm.
What was this? Was this a particular stage of being particularly thrifty, or was it just a case of you preferred ancient Greek to classic?
It's because I was. It wasn't even thrift. It was greed. I'll take as many hoplites as I can get.
Okay, fair enough.
So far, you're talking complete sense. Also, so you've had a bit of a varied immersion into the hobby, because I don't think you're very old, do you, George? Compared to us.
27, so not too old, but yeah.
Yeah, that's young.
Cool. Okay. So, what is your current? I mean, you talked about Lion Rampant and stuff. So, what is your current favourite period? What are you playing the most of?
At the moment, the thing I've played most of this year has. The thing I've played most, it's going to be the Chain of Command or Kings of War. I found a non-wargaming friend and induced them into the secret ways of our art.
Oh, okay.
With a Chain of Command, which is I think it's quite an interesting choice for sort of an introductory war game. I think some of its mechanics are very unlike what you normally get. Sort of,
yeah, they are, but they're quite easy to pick up the sort of fundamentals of Chain of Command, isn't it?
Oh, certainly, yeah. It's a very good rule set it's an intuitive rule set because it makes sense what you're trying to do, and it follows the mechanics quite well.
Yeah, cool. Of course, you don't really have to worry too much about putting in little things like range.
That is true.
And the majority of the time, right, yes, can I shoot at that? Can you see it? Yes. In that case, you can shoot at it. Yes.
But it makes sense as a game. You sort of say, this is what I want to try and do, and the rules don't stop you from doing that, which is a good thing with Chain of Command.
Indeed. So I take it you're doing that in the Western Desert.
No. Well, I say no because when my friend started, she wanted her own models as well, and she chose German Fallschirmjäger, which is an interesting choice. But I suppose that different periods make sense to different people. So, looking at the history, I thought, right, so where am I going to see Western Desert British in shorts versus German Paras and Crete?
Crete,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That'll do it. And that's a fascinating period of history.
Oh yeah, I mean, I only brushed the surface, sort of just trying to looking at the sort of the terrain and sort of the locations to get some ideas for a scenario. But yeah, it's very fascinating. Like the British have like 14 tanks or something. One of them the turret was stuck, so it could only turn left or something. Yeah, really fascinating history.
Yeah, it was a place I don't think they really expected to have a big battle on. And people are still arguing about why Germany went into it, because it didn't end well for the Germany. Yeah, they sort of got distracted by Crete massively.
That's one way of putting it.
Yeah,
but as I say, as Fallschirmjäger go, that is kind of that is kind of one of their iconic actions, isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
it's basically, it's either going to be Italy or it's going to be Normandy, isn't it? So
yeah. Oh, cool.
And so Crete's and Crete's something different, which is always good because as most of us know, everybody does Northwest Europe. So actually starting into let's do something different, which obviously means that you end up in a situation where you're having to do some reading about it. It's never a bad thing.
Indeed
not. Right. Okay. Do you think, Mr. Hobbs, that we have a sufficient introduction from Mr. Holt that we can now let him off the hook and move on?
Well, I was going to ask one more little question because you did say two words in your introduction, George, which piqued my interest, and that was specialist games.
So you did pick up on that then? Yes.
Oh yeah, that one passed. So which specialist games did you try out?
I got the Battlefleet Gothic box set. That is a really nice game, actually.
It is. It's a lovely game.
Okay, you're a friend of Mr. Hobbs for life, just for saying Battlefleet Gothic.
Yeah.
I got, as I said, Epic. I got into Epic Armageddon. When they were trying to reboot it. I like the rules. I've not played any of the other Epics, but Epic Armageddon, I think it's got some very nice mechanisms.
It's a good game. I'm sort of the problem is because I hit Epic early with Space Marine second. So when Epic Armageddon came around, I didn't really get into it, and I thought it was just a cut down version. But looking at it again, it's a really good game. And if I'd hit it first, I probably would still be playing there. But unfortunately, it was just at that time, just when I was leaving Epic, that it came out. So, yeah, a good game.
More recently, actually, a couple of friends have started playing Mordheim. So I've kit bashed some of my, well, not even kit bashed, just adopted some of my Normans as Middenheimers to fight with varying degrees of success in there.
God, I must admit, Mordheim is never one I got. I mean, everybody said that from as far as the skirmish games side of specialist games, Mordheim was always the best of the lot. But that isn't the one because I got heavily into Necromunda, but I never got into Mordheim. So I never played it.
No, me neither. It's one of those that's always been on the sort of radar of, it's dozen figures, wouldn't it be fun to try it? And then never did. But they just rebooted it, haven't they? Haven't they just done a newer version of Mordheim, or are they bringing one out?
I think it's either that or Necromunda they're doing again. I know they've re-released Necromunda.
Yeah, they released Necromunda. That was last year, wasn't it? And but yeah, I don't know if they haven't bothered doing Mordheim because they then came out with that, whatever you call it. Oh, crikey. It
was one of the box games came out last year, wasn't it?
Yes, and we've talked on the show about it, and the name has escaped me completely. But because obviously the problem with Mordheim is that the Mordheim exists in a world that no longer exists in Games Workshop. because they destroyed it.
Yeah, well, apart from that.
So that's probably maybe why when they came to do an Age of Sigmar skirmish game, they kind of jumped the way they did as opposed to rebooting Wartime. But I think at this point we need to we'll probably end up dredging up old wounds about the end of Warhammer when we get to the main part of the show. But I think we'll leave it there for now.
Just let it go, Neil. It's all right. It's gone. It's gone. They've moved on, Neil.
Well, some people have, but I'm not too sure if everybody has. But there we go. Okay. Right. Okay. In that case, then, well, George, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on, mate, and looking forward to chatting about all various aspects, things of what you've been up to, and especially Kings of War, because, as I say, it's a system I think both of us have looked at and kind of gone, and I've heard some interesting things about it, so I'd like to pick your brain on it. That'll be cool. Right, so what we'll do, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, it's confession time. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is proud to be sponsored by Two Fat Lardies, purveyors of the finest rules, supplements and gaming accessories for all your wargaming needs. Most recent in their offerings include the 100 Days Scenario Supplement 1815 for General Dame by David Brown, and also the latest point-size campaign for Chain of Command, taking the Gemblow Gap. Don't forget that you can get more Two Fat Lardies by viewing Lard TV on YouTube. The latest episodes include a 2-part playing of games from the Gemblow Gap supplement, and also includes the latest video from Big Rich as he customises some more terrain. Also, don't forget that for your listening pleasure, you can also download The Oddcast. It's available on Lord TV, but also via your podcast app of choice. Two Fat Lardies. Play the period, not the rules. Dearly beloved, you join us once again as we are here to confess everything about what we've been up to for the past week or so. In the instance of myself and Mr. Hobbs, actually, it's only been a week since we recorded our last show. Simply because of the way these things work from time to time. However, that doesn't appear to have lessened much of the impact. well, at least in my terms, anyway. So I'll go first. And okay. So now I'm going to blame. There are two people I'm going to blame at this point. Obviously, one is A1 Toys, because of them having a sale at the UK Games Expo.
Is this the company that did the cheap Room Master stuff?
The cheap Room Wars stuff, yeah.
Oh, Room Wars.
Yeah,
sorry.
And then I'm going to. Then I'm also going to blame Luke Holmes.
Hi, Luke.
Hello, Luke. Because Luke then tweeted that he got out on a bit. I think he was blaming us for the fact that having then spotted. We talked to him about Room Wars, and he went out and did the similar thing to me, except he bought most of it. I think so. He's been on a Room War spending spree, and right. So A1 Toys basically turned around to me at the Games Expo and said, "We've bought all the remaining stock in Europe, and they're going up on the website, and they'll be up in the next 10 days." So here we are, like, best part of 3 weeks later, and they still only got about 16 different box sets. And now, whether or not it's a case of there is only in Europe remaining these particular 16 box sets or what have you, but suffice it to say, they're not the 16 box sets, or they're not the 16 boxes of stuff that I particularly want. However, having bought the bulk of my Latari Elf army at the expo, I'm thinking I really would like, just some different mods, just to flesh it out. A couple of different extra units, just to flesh it out, as you do.
Yeah.
So, this week has been spent hunting around the internet and purchasing several different. Well, basically, I now own every Latari Elf unit that they publish, and multiples of some. Suffice it to say, they cost me a little bit more than the original army boxes. But we won't go there. We'll just gloss over that a little bit. Okay, so I've been buying a lot of Rune Wars figures this week, but not for Rune Wars. This is just for, just to kind of round out the edges of now the 3 Rune Wars armies that I now have, which are going to be used for other things. Perhaps they could be used for Kings of War. You never know. But definitely something like Saga, for example, because I do like the Latari Elf style as they're basically like an alternative kind of wood elf, aren't they?
Yeah.
So because they have because they have 2 types of cavalry as well. Because one of their cavalry units is actually centaurs, which I thought was quite funky. So that's kind of what I've been doing this week. So not a lot else, but I have been buying several boxes of Rune Wars figures, and then kind of rounding out a couple of extra bits and pieces. Like, for example, buying a couple of extra boxes of cavalry, just so you end up with, you can have more than 4 models in a unit, and have So it's been a Rune Wars-y sort of week. And then the other thing is that do you remember I told you that when was it? 2 months, 2.5 months ago, I got the Streets of Arkham expansion from when it got reprinted, and it arrived, and I discovered that it didn't have any models in it. Do you remember that?
No.
Oh right, okay. This was a while ago. This must have been the best part of 2 or 3 months ago. Okay, so Streets of Arkham was the big box expansion for Mansions of Madness. I didn't own, and it came back into they reprinted it earlier in the year. So as soon as they reprinted it, it was like, right, gotta have one of those. So grabbed that. It arrived, and it was a couple of weeks before I unwrapped the cellophane, and then I unwrapped the cellophane and pulled everything out, and it was like, okay, right, we have all these extra, we have new tiles, new cards, new model bases, and
no models.
No models at all. It's got new monsters and new characters, and they completely failed to pack the models. And so I raised a ticket with Asmodee, as you do, because they have a ticketing system as part of the Fantasy Flight website. If you go onto their community page, they have a thing, and funny enough, one of the things is missing components. So I raised a ticket with Asmodee to say, excuse me, I bought this and it's missing the miniatures. They arrived today. It's only taken them, as I say, I reckon about 10 weeks. For me turning around and saying, "Excuse me, I'm missing my miniatures," to them actually arriving, and they dispatched them start of the week, I think, or back into last week from the States. But I'm thinking, it has to be said especially considering the size of Asmodee or Fantasy Flight. Not the most impressive piece of customer service I've ever come across, but at least I've got them.
You've got them, yeah, that's the main thing.
Yes, I now have them. Other than that, no, that's me done. Yes, it's been it's been a shortish week, but it's been a Rune Warsy sort of week. So that's me. So then, George, how about you? What have you been spending your hard-earned money on?
Well, lately I've been a bit cash strapped. So in the last week, I have managed to not spend anything, which is something of a miracle, to be honest. Over the past couple of months, I've been picking up stuff for Chain of Command because there's so many tanks, and I want them all. I think the Western Desert is the worst theatre for tanks because you've got all of them. You've got all the little A9s and the Vickers Mark 6s in the early war. Then you've got the Lees and the Shermans and the Stuarts. You've got the whole range. I think you've at Alamein they've even got Churchills, some of the early ones. So I recently got from the Plastic Soldier Company. I got their 3 boxes of Stuarts and 1 frame of the A9 Cruiser. I love the early British cruiser. They're just so idiosyncratic and so badly designed from a tank point of view.
So I was going to say that's a good description of them. Idiosyncratic. Yes.
Yeah, pointy. Some would say pointy and angular. So So is that in 20mm?
Yes.
Yeah. Which is the right scale.
Well, it's the same scale as Airfix kits, so yeah.
Yep.
Despite owning World War II in multiple scales, Mr. Hobbs is recently becoming a bit more evangelical about doing World War II in 20mm.
It's where I started.
Well, to be fair, it is where a lot of us started.
Yeah.
But it's just that some of us have moved. But yeah.
I've moved. I've returned.
You've come back, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there is that one thing with Chain of Command is that, basically it's a case of you look down your reinforcement list and you end up going, well, I just want one of everything.
Just in case.
Yeah, and of course, especially with the fact that it's a game where reconnaissance or using light vehicles actually works, and light vehicles are actually relatively effective. It kind of encourages getting all the, what's the phrase? Getting all your crap out on the table.
Yeah.
So, I foresee a lot of, even more kind of like small, lightly armoured vehicles in your future, Mr. Holt.
I know. I still don't have any Bren carriers, so that's going to be a major drain.
Oh, you've got to get some of them. The 20mm ones that Plastic Soldier Company do are great. Go together really nicely.
Yeah, and the Plastic Soldier Company Bren carrier is very nice, though it is a complete pain in the butt to assemble. Or at least I thought it was.
The 20mm one's okay. It's a little bit bigger. The 15mm ones are, yeah.
Well, I struggle with the 20mm ones myself, but as Mr. Love would say, that's probably down to my sausage engineering fingers.
No comment.
So is that it? Have you just been So you've just been stuck with lots of Western Desert tanks
and infantry,
right?
Oh yes.
Oh yeah. I'm really interested looking at the history again. It turns out that half the Axis forces are actually Italian.
Oh yeah, you got lots of Italians.
Oh yeah. So I've got a couple of boxes of the Italians from Airfix, and I can't remember the other manufacturer off the top of my head, but it's a 28mm plastic box set. So I've got a full platoon plus a few extra supports, and obviously I'm now going to need to buy tanks for them eventually. But hell horror!
Yeah. The Italian tanks in early war. Oh, you're going to love them.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you're almost 3/4 of the way there towards doing that, and also doing a bit of water tanker on the side.
Oh, that would involve another book, and then I'd even buy even more tanks. And no, don't tempt me.
You only need one tank for a water tanker. Just the one tank each. That's all you need.
However,
and you've got them anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, on the bit, yeah, I mean, as I say, you only need. I mean, even if you're playing it like 1v1, you only need like 3.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be. And the best thing about water tanker is actually, controversially, you may think, but I think early war water tanker is a darn sight more entertaining than late war water tanker, because at least in early war water tanker, there's lots of things like stuff bouncing off things.
Mm.
It's a lot more fun, as opposed to I've shot it, I've killed it.
Oh, George, you know you wanna.
And now come to think of it, because all the early war British tanks don't come with HE, they're not really that attractive to buy in chain of command. But in what a tanker, you don't need to worry about HE, do you?
Exactly.
Not at the moment. What was the phrase? Not at the moment. Until they come out with their pesky campaign supplement, which allegedly will include things like anti-tank guns and stuff. But yeah, we'll step away from that one. But no, indeed not. Yes.
Yeah, it's our recommendation is to get water tanker to everybody. It's a good introductory game for wargaming, and it's a lot of fun, especially with a few beers.
Oh, I might be persuaded then.
You know, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else?
No, not really. Oh, I think I've got a bag of lichen for making scrub, but that's hardly worth mentioning.
Well, we'll allow it on this one occasion.
Thank you, George. Right, okay, Mr. Hobbs, what have you been up to in the last week or so?
Oh, right. Not much.
No.
I've been quite good. I've bought a couple of things. Did I mention Stargrunt 2 on the last show? I can't remember.
I think we did mention Stargrunt 2 on the last show, yes. Because you played it.
Yeah, did I mention I bought it?
With the deal.
Yes, I did. Okay.
Yes.
So,
I must admit, I was a bit, I wasn't aware at the time of the postage. And it was like, oh my word. Hence your comment of, okay, great, that's fine, you can just pay the postage.
It wasn't so bad. $30 for the 4 books. Very good. That's why I bought 4 books. Anyway, so forget about Stargrunt.
Yes.
That's all last podcast.
Although having said that, I was most impressed by what you'd found what you found today. Was it yesterday? Or your 15mm stuff?
Oh yeah. Oh, well, that's for ages. Yeah. Yeah, my 15mm sci-fi stuff. Yes. Good. Yeah. So the only thing I bought, right, BattleTech. Remember I bought a copy of Alpha Strike and the core rulebook at the Firestorm Bring and Buy.
Yes.
Last month. And I thought, well, I haven't any mechs to play with. I need some mechs.
I thought you said you didn't particularly like the mechs that came with the game.
Well, I don't, but I need some.
Excuse me. Can I interject 1 second? But you have mechs. Okay, they might be on the slightly large side, but you have mechs. They just happen to be Games Workshop. Or are you not allowed to say Games Workshop and mech in the same sentence?
No, stop being logical.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So I didn't have any mechs. So I was having a little hunt around, and there's lots of places to do them, and you get the old rail powerful ones and stuff. And then I sort of stumbled across on eBay the BattleTech introductory box.
Oh dear.
Which has 25 mechs in it.
What? Well, these metal or plastic?
Plastic.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. Plus the sort of quick start rules and maps and all sorts of stuff in there. All the tokens, there's some dice. It hasn't been out for a while. So, and apparently it goes for stupid money on eBay. But I found one which the guy had managed to sort of mistype the title. So,
so basically nobody found it.
Nobody found it apart from me. So I just put a low bid on it, walked away, came back 4 days later, and bing, you've just won BattleTech introductory box.
That's a real stroke of luck there.
It was, yeah. Yeah, it's always worth that on eBay, just searching for things around the thing that you're actually searching for. But
I
yeah.
hear. I must admit, at this point, I hear several listeners issuing a string of expletives.
Well, the last one I saw on it was about 150 quid. If somebody was wanting for it. There's one in America. What's $300 plus $70 postage?
Oh my word!
Yeah, I got mine for 50 quid.
What sort of nick is it? Is it looking decent nick?
Perfect. It's been opened. That's but all. Been opened, looked at, and put back in the box.
Oh dear.
So I've got the BattleTech introductory box now. So I've got no excuse to not play BattleTech, other than the fact I want to paint some of them up, and then I need to work out some colour schemes.
Yeah, but
so give me a year or so, and I reckon I'll have it on the table.
Yeah, but what scale are they? 10 mil?
Yeah, so they're about sort of 4 inches high. No, not 4 inches. About 3 inches high. The only thing is that they're not all to scale. They're all sort of similar size.
Eh? Oh.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like buying toy cars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But hey, I've got 25 of them in the bag.
Fair enough. Excellent.
Yeah. So there we go. So that's it. That's all I bought.
Impressive. Cool. Right. Okay. Well, if that's it, then we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, it's time to chat about what we've been up to hobby-wise.
What about Temptations?
Oh! Sorry. Yes, sorry. I was forgetting about Temptations. Has anybody got any?
Yeah, I got a couple.
Oh, shocking indeed, Homer.
Yeah.
Go on then.
Okay, so there's a couple of things that tempt me at the moment. I've got past Malifaux. I've managed to hold that one off.
Oh, you have? Oh, that's most impressive.
Until I walk into Firestorm and find the new game rule book there, and I'll probably pick it up. But for now, it's been parked. Well, now I've played Stargate, I quite like it. I'm interested to see what else Mr. Tuffley's done. So I'm sort of interested by Full Thrust.
Oh. Right, well, there were two things because there's obviously Full Thrust and there's also Dirt Side.
Yeah, now what is Dirt Side? Is that land based?
Yeah, so Dirt. Well, but basically, Dirt Side is Dirt Side is to Epic what Stargrunt was to 40k. Except I believe Dirt Side came before Stargrunt.
Oh, okay.
So Dirt Side is 6 mil scale sci-fi gaming. But
I can't go. I can't do Dirt Side. My heart.
May I interject here?
Go on, please.
I did download the rules for Dirt Side. I haven't read them, but I did read as far as the section of rules for adding mechs to the game. I think you can. Then BattleTech certainly fits in with 6 mil scale, just about.
Yes.
You're
not helping here, George. I'm weak.
Yes, and yes. But yes, Full Thrust. Yes, and they have they have because they launched it at Salute, a brand new sparkly introductory box set.
They do. That's what I found. Because you can get the rules down. They can download Full Thrust and everything, and they look really good. And got lots of spaceships from Armado and stuff.
Yeah, but there is this other thing, of course, that I mean, have you seen the Full Thrust fleets?
Yeah, they're lovely.
They are seriously some of the best ships out there. They are. I mean, some of them are just awesome. I mean, what was it? Yeah, things like New Swabian League. Yeah, I've got some of the ones that don't honest look like EarthGov from Babylon 5 at all. Honest Gov.
Oh, cool. As long as they don't, that's the main thing.
They don't. They just have. They just have the old spinny bit in the middle.
Well,
artificial gravity
in
the middle. Yeah. But they are seriously cool. Full Thrust is a great game, and of course especially when you have the two different styles of navigation. Yes, because you have the cinematic and then you have the vectored.
Yeah,
which is always great fun.
So I might need to chat to Ralph about that one and see if he's interested in a bit of Full Thrust. That sounded wrong. Rolf, I'm sorry. So, yeah, and dirt sites. I mean, so George, you've had a look at dirt sites. Do you sort of think you might be interested? Would it be worth a dabble, do you think?
I think definitely. I really like the Ground Zero games, their sci-fi setting, at least what I've read of it, and their technologies. I think it's really quite interesting. So I would recommend having a look at least. You don't have to play it; it's just if you read the rules.
Yeah. So there's that. My continued descent into Jesus G. Thank you, Ralph, for getting me into that one. The other thing I found today was an email that arrived into our mailbox, which is a new Kickstarter called Orcs in Shorts.
Oh, yes. Yes. The people who previously bought us Cowboy Orcs.
Yes.
In two variations. Orcs in Shorts.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, this is basically the 8th Army Orcs. This is where George Surfer goes, oh, hang on. I could do orcs in the desert.
I saw the link and I was very excited.
They look so cool.
So the company is Miniature Men, who say that they previously done. I think the orcs they did most of what they did previously was Old West orcs, cowboys, and such like. But yeah, this is a new departure for them.
Yeah, because the old range was Panzerfaust, wasn't it? By Hysterical.
Yeah. And
they've gone on. I think they're back with Wessex Games.
The last I heard from Wessex, because they have everything in house, but obviously Steve Blease is still trying to essentially work out what on earth they're going to do with it, and how they're going to fund it and moving forward, and whether they can still, have the whole thing as a going concern. And it was a real shame because I must admit I was right on the cusp of getting a German dwarf infantry platoon.
Yeah.
About a week, and if I'd left it about a week, I'd have put an order in. Because I was there. I was actually at the point of going, right, okay. I was just sorting it out, go back to push the button, and then they went, Hysterical Games is no longer.
Yeah, real shame that.
It is because great company, and they got with some really cool models.
Mm.
Yeah. So yes, here we go then. So yes, orcs with shorts.
Yep.
So how many have they got on the Kickstarter?
They pretty much got the full range there for sort of standard troops.
Yeah.
Let's have a look. So yeah, you pretty much can do like a mix and match. So you got your close assault ones, long range ones, range special weapons, and there's some machine gunners. I mean, they're very similar to in stature to the GW ones. They're 8th Army. And you got NCOs. So yeah, you could quite easily put together a full platoon.
Excellent stuff.
Yeah. So all looks good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anything else you spotted that you're kind of interested in, George, or is it?
Well, if there's anything that's going to get me back into Warhammer 40k, it's going to be World War II Orcs.
No, I could just imagine having those on the table, especially if you've got like orc battle wagons, which are basically made from 28mm early World War II. I mean, take your pick out of some of Rubicon's stuff and then convert them into orc battle wagons, and watch people's faces.
I think I'd probably go for 1/35 because they'll probably match the scale a bit better.
Well, yeah, probably.
Because Rubicon, you probably get. I don't think one of these orcs would actually fit in the turret.
Yes.
Yeah.
But even
You think of
even
it-
so, even so, you could just imagine that, force of that, couple of converted World War II tanks. Brilliant.
Yeah, get a Spitfire or something as a fighter bomber.
Oh.
No, it had to be a Hurricane, wouldn't it? It couldn't be a Spitfire. It had to be a Hurricane. I mean, Desert War. Hurricane?
Mosquito.
Mosquito.
140th scale Mosquito. That'd be lovely.
It would be lovely. It's a big kit.
Yeah.
Yes.
So here we are again. This is Meeples Miniatures, taking historical gaming completely seriously.
So serious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and having fun.
Indeed. Cool. One thing I forgot to mention in my purchasing, because I pushed the button this week and I ordered version 2 of Test of Honor. Pre-ordered version 2 of Test of Honor.
Good for you.
So that was the other thing I did this week. And then I was looking at just a few of the bits of the of that range on my on the radar, and kind of Conqueror Miniatures, who are the guys who, amongst other things, are producing the range of dwarves sculpted by Colin Patton. They've just got some new dwarf warriors with assaulted hand weapons. They've come out this week. They're rather nice.
Nice.
Yeah. And they've just started doing. They've also started doing selling STL files, and they had this one of this I think it's like a Demon Prince. So I think scale wise, it's going to be it's about 120 mil tall. So, but yeah, it's just something else they've just started doing. I thought, oh, that looks nice. Because originally it's like, oh, that looks a lovely model, and they went, oh no, it's just it's just an STL file. You have to actually provide the rest of it. But there we go.
Yeah, there we go. Well, that's temptation still, I think.
Cool. Okay then. In that case, then we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, it's time to sort out what we've been doing in the hobby. Hi everyone, Neon here. I hope you enjoy this episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you are, I'm wondering, would you consider becoming a patron of the show? For as little as $1 a month, you can help support us in what we're doing with the show. For that, you can get access to a monthly question and answer show, and that will also allow you to ask questions. If you pledge more, you potentially get bonus podcasts. And you never know, you might even get invited to be on the show yourself. If you want to know more details, please follow the link to our Patreon page, which is on the front of the website. That's www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. Thanks a lot. So, time to talk about everything we've been doing in the hobby over the past, recently. For us, yet again, it's been a week or so. Me, not an awful lot, because I've been poorly sick. Basically, if you remember on the last show, I was talking about the fact that I went down with major lurgy just before Market Garden 7, and yes. Didn't do well immediately after Market Garden 7, so I've only really just kind of recovered in the last day or so. So, not played a lot. I've not really been in the mood to paint a lot, to be honest. So, the two things I managed to do, hobby-wise, in the last week was I actually managed to have a look at my copy of Outer Rim, which I bought at the Games Expo. So I've managed to punch it, bag it, and sleeve it. So that's achievement, the hobby achievement number 1. And then I was invited over to Mr. Hickman's to have a game of Joan of Arc, as you do. Now, I don't know if you mentioned this on the last show. I think we might have mentioned this on the last show, but there's quite a bit of Joan of Arc. We thought, right, okay, we'll play the first scenario. So we looked at the first scenario in the scenario book, and it gave us the details of everything that we needed. And we soon discovered that not all the miniatures, or indeed all the cards that were in the that were described in the scenario, happened to be in the base set.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think it basically boiled down to I found it strange, but basically, it was essentially that there were a couple of characters. I think it was it was the town, one of the townspeople, and the farmer. Okay, from this first scenario, the farmer, they'd used one of the peasant figures, which was from a set of miniatures that is in the stretch goals. Okay, and also this other character, they'd actually used the guy who's actually part of the Performing Bear vignette or unit, which again is in the stretch goals, and the cards happen to be in the stretch goals. However, we weren't kind of expecting that, and Mr. Hickman hadn't kind of unpacked anything. Well, he hadn't actually unpacked anything. So it was a bit frustrating by the fact that we got everything out, and I mean, so went over, and so the first thing you end up doing is you start punching out tokens. Now, you know the average Mythic game, how many tokens you get. So
10, 20, 25?
Yeah. And all the boards and playing boards and everything. And then it's like, well, while we're here, we might as well sleeve the cards if we're going to play with them. And then we ended up in a situation because we couldn't find these other little expansion bits. We ended up going, okay, well, we won't bother playing the scenario. We'll just finish off sleeving the cards. So the bottom line is, I got invited round for a game of Joan of Arc, and ended up helping Dave to punch and sleeve his entire game.
What a good friend you are.
I think I got done. Mr. Hickman, j'accuse. I think it was all a ruse. I think he might have hid something on purpose and invited me round under false pretenses.
He'd never do that.
He might. You never know. So there we go. So that was that was the entirety of my hobby time this week. Was basically spent punching and sleeving 2 different board games, one of which wasn't even mine. Gripping stuff.
Yeah.
There we go. George, what have you been up to recently?
Well, my last gaming adventure, as I mentioned, was Crete. So in the run-up for that, I had was a big push to finish my British chain of command platoon plus support options. And I also the interesting thing about that is I also did a couple of 20mm houses. Checking online, it seems that some of the Cretan houses are sort of square enough that they can just about pass for the sort of square adobe houses you get in North Africa, which is convenient because I dual purpose them.
Yeah.
And I made those scratch built out of some foam inserts I had lying around from I think it's Figures in Comfort or something. The foam storage tray people.
Yeah.
So I glued those together as sort of the skeleton. Then I surrounded that with a card shell, and then just sort of covered that with sort of texture paint. And after with a bit of paint, it looks all right, especially for the price.
That's a good idea, actually. Yeah, because they're those foam inserts. They're nice and squared, aren't
they? Yeah, they're great, and it just gives it a bit of structure. Because like with cardboard, it tends to be a bit flimsy, but
yeah.
With a bit of foam backing, it's it's robust enough to start having models put on top of it and transport and everything.
Cool. Yeah, good idea.
So one thing I have to ask you about, because you mentioned that most of the infantry you're using is Airfix, yeah?
Yep.
So that's the Airfix soft plastics.
Yep.
Okay, how have you got on painting them, and how do you paint them? Do you paint them as just like standard, the standard way you paint plastics, or is there anything you do particularly, especially to stop the paint peeling off them?
The bizarre thing is, I've not had any problems with paint peeling. I've just treated them as I would any other plastic figure, and they've been fine. I mean, it is a pain to scrape off all the mould lines because the plastic doesn't suit that very well.
Mm.
But apart from that, I've not had no problems. I mean, maybe because they've just been lying in a drawer for 10, 15 years means that, that whatever oil or gunk on them has come off. But yeah, I can't offer you any help, I'm afraid. I've had no problems.
Cool. Okay. And how have you found? Because obviously the FX 20mm are kind of realistic scale, so the detailing is not exactly pronounced, shall we say? So how have you got on with that? I mean, have they been picked out okay with your detailing and washes or what have you?
Well, with the Brits, certainly, it's the advantage is, most of the uniforms are all one colour, and then it's just sort of the canvas.
Yeah.
And I haven't done a great job, but you can tell what they are at a meter's distance. But I definitely, yeah. Honestly, I quite like the figures without too many extra details, because it means that of all the little details, it's what takes most of all.
Sure. No, it's fine. No, as I say, 3 foot rule. Well, I mean, I do all my stuff definitely to do 3 foot rule, so that's perfectly fine. Mate. Oh no, I just wondered because obviously, I've got a friend of mine who most of his stuff is, he does all his ancients in 20mm soft plastics, from all sorts of people. I just wondered if you had any particular issues with them, but obviously not. Cool.
There is something really nostalgic about doing an army using Airfix figures. It does appeal. Just because we all started there. I mean, I started with Airfix, although I did wargaming with Airfix. But there's just something fun about thinking, let's just pick up a box and just use them in the game.
It depends on your definition of wargaming. I mean, I threw marbles at mine.
I just used to paint them. I never did it. I never played games with any of my Airfix stuff, and I did loads of it. But there's that lovely Brengan holder that's lying down, isn't there? That's the one figure I always remember.
Although he looks a bit out of place because none of the other models in the set are lying down, so you've got your entire section standing apart from the bloke with the Brengan. He's
laying down to specify. That's the thinking, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. What with the Brengan on its side?
Yeah.
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 It's so tempting to buy a box.
I tell you, I had almost every box of them in, or even multiple boxes in 1/35 scale. Each different one, even including the British Ordnance set. The one that had like the Vickers heavy machine gun and the mortar and all that stuff in it. I had them all, and for some crazy reason, in my early 20s, I suddenly decided that I didn't want these figures anymore, and I gave them away to my friends' sons for them to play with. And a few years, it wasn't very much long later, I kind of suddenly went, why on earth did I do that? With all these classic models, which, if I had them, I'm sure that if I had them now, I'd have painted them up and be gaming with them for like small skirmishes and stuff. But never mind. Hey.
Yeah.
Hobby regrets.
Indeed.
Anyway, but we're not talking about hobby regrets. We're talking, we're talking about stuff we've been doing in the hobby. Okay, sorry, you were saying, Chain of Command Create.
Yes. I didn't do too much into sort of the scenario building. So I just struck up to her place, got the mat out, and we rolled a few scenarios. I've not been playing Chain of Commands too long, as I only started last year, and I found attacking's really hard, especially against elite troops in hard cover.
Yeah,
you don't want to do that.
Yeah. Just no. Yeah. And everywhere as well. You need artillery, lots of it. Pummel them with artillery for about 4 hours, and then just go on the pub.
I know. Again, that's the problem with early war British lists. There's no HE at all.
Oh, you got mortars.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
But that's about it. But elite troops will seriously ruin your day.
Yes.
I mean, as somebody who has spent most of his chain of command career fighting against British Airborne.
Oh.
German here versus British Airborne. Yeah, even Panzer Grenadiers. I desperately need to. I desperately need to get these. I'm waiting for the Arnon campaign book to come out. So where we have the slightly less than slightly less than superhuman British Airborne, to kind of put my stuff back in his box a little bit, because otherwise, I feel for you. I feel for you. Well, I mean, it's. I suppose you can spend most of the game just admiring the paint jobs of the opposition, while they have turn after turn after turn, and just obliterate you with automatic fire.
I think the rule whereby the extra dice doesn't count for extra turns is a very good rule.
Yes.
Yes. Is that one of the new ones in the Blitzkrieg rulebook?
No, I've not read the Blitzkrieg rulebook. I think it's just a thing I picked up off the forums. It might be the errata. I think they have mentioned this about elite troops and also green troops. I think with green troops you have a fifth dice that only counts for sixes and possibly fives.
So this is the change that the extra dice is a different colour.
It's the red dice, isn't it?
Yeah, got you. Yeah. So I must admit, I haven't been playing Chain of Command for a while. Talking of which, we'll talk about that in a minute. Or maybe no, we'll talk about that at the end. But we'll carry on. Okay, right. So, anything else you've been up to?
This is bringing something that I should have mentioned earlier, but I've been basing up my 2mm Cold War armies.
2mm Cold War?
Yes, I've got this fascination with making the ground scale match the model scale, and because of the ranges involved in the Cold War, like 2mm is probably the only scale that's achievable.
Yes. So what manufacturer have you been using?
Irregular. Are there any other manufacturers? Because I haven't found any.
Well,
not 2
mil.
3 mil.
3 mil. You've got Oddsall's Osme.
Yeah, that's worth looking at because they're lovely.
And they have a similar thing. I mean, we were playing Cold War Commander with 3 mil stuff. And the ground scale was almost exact because you ended up in a situation where it's a kilometre is 50 centimetres.
Yeah.
Which basically works out almost exact in ground scale. And also with the size of the figures, you can basically produce pretty much everything in 1-to-1 scale. So is that kind of the rabbit hole you've gone down?
Yeah, it is. I've been desperately hoping that there'll be some news about I Ain't Been Nuked Mum, the Cold War version of I Ain't Been Shot Mum, but I think that's been dead for a few years now.
Yeah, that was being done by a couple of guys on the forum, wasn't it?
Yeah, I thought at one point they were going to be, because they now have the Lardy Annual as opposed to the specials. I thought at one point there was a discussion that they were actually going to publish it in there. Possibly. I may be wrong. Having said that, I mean, there is always what's it called? That recent set from Great Escape Games.
7 Days to the River Rhine.
7 Days to the River Rhine. You come across that yet at all, George?
Yeah, I've looked at some of their videos on YouTube. It does look quite interesting. It might be worth a look.
It is. It's similar mechanics to Iron Cross. It's got a really nice mechanic in there. It really makes you think about what you're doing. So, again, it's quite reasonable for the rules, so definitely worth picking up and having a little look.
It might be worth a look. I've already got Cold War Commander. I think I've had like one solo game of that. It's all right. I think I think I've played enough to make a real judgment. Really.
What era are you playing?
80s. I've got British Army of the Rhine and Soviets. Although I slightly modified it, sort of an alternate history. Welsh revolutionaries sponsored by the Soviets. So the Welsh can get if you access like 25 pounders and so on, which doesn't really make much difference.
Oh, we'd use them. We use anything, I suppose.
Okay, so British Army of the Rhine. So have you gone? So are you Chieftain or Challenger?
Oh, Chieftain.
Yeah,
more graceful.
Yeah. We found. That's what I. Yeah, that. I mean, I did. I did the British Army of the Rhine, First Armoured Battalion, in 3 mil. And then faced off against a guy who liked his Russians, and so the very first thing he did was come onto the board and then hit the entire British Army with chemical weapons. And since chieftains have a bit of an issue with being sealed, or not, as the case may be, let's say. The third game we played, when he just did exactly the same tactic, at that point we kind of said, so is this all you're going to do in future? Is that you're just going to turn up and then blow us away with chemical weapons? And he went, seems to be the sensible way to play the army. This is from somebody who he's a competition DBM player.
I can imagine that being the case.
Not that I'm timing everybody with a particular brush, but suffice it to say, we stopped playing with him. Anyway, yes, but Cold War Commander is I think is actually a pretty decent set of rules. As I say, after that experience, I was actually kind of thinking they probably be better suited to something like, I don't know. I've seen some interesting games done with those with the Iran-Iraq war, because there you've actually got to, as far as your, especially when it comes down to tank battles and stuff, you've got two similar-ish style forces. So you can have some fun games with that.
There we go. Is it my turn?
Yep.
Cool.
Well, no gaming. Unfortunately. Couldn't get over to the forest to meet up with Matt and Ralph and Mark, unfortunately, because of work currently. And then I think, I've done no gaming. I did the painting though. I carried on with my orcs.
What are these? Your Mordor orcs? Yeah.
So I've done them. So that was 48 of them done in a week. Plus
48?
Yeah, I'm going to do a roll. They're easy. They're easy. Plus 4 commanders, so they're done. I based up all of my other sort of standard orcs, which I had in boxes. So I've got 50, 60, I've got about 70 odd of those to paint. But they're all based up. So we've gone orc-tastic, as you can say. I painted up another model from Mythic Battles Pantheon, so I've done Achilles. And I've started the Titan.
Oh, yes.
I just wanted to paint a big figure.
And as figures go, he's pretty big.
Pretty big. Yeah, he's pretty chunky.
Yeah,
so he's about 3/4 done.
He's looking smashing. So how have you done the... I'm intrigued to know how you've done the flesh on that.
It is Foundry North African. 3 shades. And then just washes in between. I use sort of flesh washes on it. It's sort of layering and highlighting. It's done pretty quick. It didn't be all that long. It's really well detailed model.
So it's very effective. It looks very effective.
Yeah, it surprised me. It would look like a professional did it. It's lovely, and then just some little spot washes because he's got lots of little cuts and things in the body and the arms. So I just dotted on a little bit of red wash into the cuts just to make it look sort of, wounded, shall we say. But yeah, lovely little figure to paint up. I'm enjoying that. And that's it. Not much. Well, other than the 52 orcs.
Other than the 50 odd, yeah. Other than the 52 orcs,
yeah.
Not much. Yes.
Yeah.
Yet again, Mr. Hobbs putting us all to shame.
I have these splurges. It's like, when the urge takes me there, I'll just paint away, and that's what I did.
Cool, excellent stuff. Right, well, in that case then, if there's nothing else, folks, we shall take a quick break, and when we come back, it is time to get our teeth into the meat of this particular episode. And we will be chatting with George all about Kings of War and tournament gaming. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is proud to be sponsored by Firestorm Games. Whether you need wargames rules, miniatures, paints, hobby accessories, scenery, board games, card games, all your role-playing needs, and even toys and collectibles, Firestorm Games is your store of choice. Check them out at www.firestormgames.co.uk or at their stores located in Cardiff, Newport and Swindon. Don't forget, if you use the code SUMMERYMeeple, that's SUMMERYMEEPLE, all lowercase, you will get an extra discount on your order. Firestorm Games, for all your hobby goodness. So here we are, and we're back for the main part of the show. Now, when George found out the news that he had indeed won and was coming on the show in a few weeks, I'm not quite sure exactly how much we intimidated him when we then turned around and said, "Okay, then what do you want to talk about?" Was it a difficult decision?
I was terrified. I lost sleep because of it.
Oh, no.
I had to pick my brains up. Oh God, what have I been doing?
Okay, so you plumbed on Kings of War. Particular reason behind that, or was it because, as you kind of intimated earlier, it's kind of the game you've been playing the most of?
Yeah, really. I mean, it doesn't hurt that you've been sort of mentioning it on and off for a while now. Well, yeah, it is probably the game I've been playing most over the last few years.
Cool. So you mentioned that actually you kind of got into it when you were teaching somebody else how to wargame. So where did you kind of go? Where did you go from there with it? And what armies have you got and stuff?
I've only really got the one army, which is based around my Normans, because that's the great thing about fantasy. If you stick a few wizards in a historical army, then you're done. I've also got a Beastman allied contingent, which are really good for sort of fighting in difficult terrain and stuff, because the Beastmen, called the Herd in Kings of War, get an army special rule that means they can more or less ignore difficult terrain for movement, which is very convenient, especially in a wooded battlefield. At the moment, I'm in a very slow process of repainting my old Chaos Warriors to a more modern standard, and I'm going to field them as another faction, which is Chaos Warriors with the serial numbers filed off, called the Varangur, as it's known in the community. But that's more or less it, really, for armies, just the two.
Two's enough?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, well, let's chat about Kings of War, because it's a game that I don't think me or Neil have played.
I've vaguely seen. Well, I think I own the Kings of War historical rulebook. That's about as much as I can say about it.
Mm. So, Kings of War, it's a large battle fantasy game, 28mm standard.
Yeah, it really is Warhammer for people who wanted to keep playing Warhammer.
And it's individual based figures, isn't it?
Not quite. Whilst the unit sizes are based around regular sized bases arranged in ranks and files, because all the units are of a certain size, like there's 10 for infantry, there's 10 figures 5x2, then you've got 20 figures 5x4, then you've got 10 by 4 deep, and if you're very lucky, you can get 10 by 6 deep. But those are fixed unit sizes. So if you know the base size for your army, Orcs is 25mm, everything else is 20. You're going to have a fixed footprint for all of your models, and because there's no figure removal, you can have like dioramas on your base. So it's actually much more close to element based gaming. And so if you want to convert your army, then you can actually have a lot of leeway to have some pretty interesting dioramas on your bases.
That's interesting, because I always thought it was single figure, and they did figure removal. So here we go. We're 2 seconds into the review, and I've learned something already. That's cool. So it's all element based. There's no figure removal at all in the
no.
Game.
You accumulate damage to your units, and it's not that once you reach a threshold you're suddenly dead. You add your damage to a 2d6 roll, and if it beats your nerve value, then you're dead. So it's the more damage you take, the more likely you are to rout, but it's not certain.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a nice mechanic there.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, this is it's primarily aimed at 28mm, but I'm guessing you can play it with other scales, because as you say, it's an element game, and as long as you know the size of what the elements are, you can play with anything, can't you?
Yeah, I think there have been some people who've done it in 10mm. I've not looked into that because I haven't got any 10mm fantasy, but it's doable at any scale really, as long as you convert the distances or have a lot more figures per base.
I don't know anybody who's got any 10mm fantasy figures. Mr. Harbers, do you know anybody who's got any 10mm fantasy figures at all?
I got a couple, but anyway, moving on. So how many sort of units do you think makes up a sort of standard game?
I think usually it's 10 to 20 units. 10 to 20 units is normal. For a sort of a 2,000 point game, which I think is probably a holdover from Warhammer Fantasy. And that's your usual, 6 foot by 4 foot table, done in a couple of hours. In fact, less than a couple of hours if you're using chest locks. It's quite a fast to play game. But more of that, probably I can discuss more of that later.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
As soon as you mentioned chess clocks.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most exciting thing about the tournament scene is the chess clocks.
Sure. Okay. So you say we got a large battle
Yeah.
game, fantasy, elements based 6x4, 10 user side, lovely, nice start of it. So when you're putting your armies together, are there specific army lists, or do you have the ability to sort of create your own armies from a sort of points generator? How would you sort of put together an army?
It's they've got army lists, and you choose units from that. It's pretty much by the units you want up to the points in it. There's a few restrictions, so you've got to have a certain number of big standard units to unlock your heavy weapons, so to unlock your siege weapons, monsters, and heroes. There are some units that are irregular, which means that which means they don't count as sort of a core unit, and they have to be bought as an add-on to another core unit. But when you're buying them as add-on for another unit, that's just for army list purposes. You don't have to then fight, as a coherent block.
Right. So it's basically you can't just turn up and do the sort of mini-max special of going for all of the elite units. You've got to have a core of sort of fairly regular troops, which you can then add extra units to it.
Sort of. I think it's actually. I think it's a lot more flexible than that, because when I say core units, it's usually just the term is regiments and hordes. Mm-hmm. That's sort of your 20 strong infantry or 40 strong infantry, or 3 sort of troll-sized models, or 6. And so there's actually a lot of flexibility with the armies you can build. Like if you want a very small elite army, you could probably get away with about 30 models, whereas my Normans, because it's all infantry and cavalry, I've got over 100. That both 2,000 points. As I mentioned, you can bring in allies, and their systems like that is really flexible, because you can take up to a quarter of your points as allies with very few restrictions, other than you've got to have the core allied units before you can start adding on characters and monsters. And the only difference is that your characters can't give morale bonuses. It's called inspiring to allied units and vice versa. You also can't cast spells on allied units. But other than that, it's you can take more or less what you want within reason.
Yeah. Okay. So what we're sort of saying is the army lists allow you some flexibility, but you still need to have this sort of core of standards or troops and regiments.
Yeah.
And then for that you can then add sort of the extra sort of shiny war engines and monsters.
Yes.
And heroes. So we've sort of actually we'll come back to command and control. So I think that gives us an idea, and it's points based, isn't it, as well? So
yes.
So you can have you can pick allies. Is there sort of specifics on which allies would go through each army, or I suppose what I'm trying to say is there sort of a background to the rules that dictates how the armies fight?
There is background to the rules. There's they've got their own sort of fantasy setting that's loosely based on medieval Europe, which is very original, I know. But in terms of who you can ally with, they've got sort of 3 alignments: good, bad, and neutral. The humans are neutral, obviously, and you can only sort of ally within one step. So your humans can ally with evil orcs or good elves, but you can't have elves and orcs allied together.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds fair. Okay, so there's a bit of leeway, but it's nothing that's gonna sort of stop you from sort of being able to put a game together quite nicely. Okay, so we've sat down, we've brought our armies, we worked out the sort of points. I'm kind of guessing there's going to be scenarios in the book that you would sort of pick a scenario that gives you the setup, the objectives, and the what you need to do to win.
Yes, there's a fair range of scenarios. They tend to be quite gamist and abstract, but there's a lot of variety. So usually you'll end up setting up 12 inches onto the long edge of the board, or rather 24 inches apart. And there's a sort of a variety of objectives. I think in tournaments, at least, they try to avoid the straight up kill scenario, which is just victory points for enemy units killed, because it can favour sort of just sitting there with a gun line. And so there's sort of all the objective based games where there's objectives that you have to push into enemy territory, or there's a scattering of objectives around the board, or even there's one scenario where the terrain features like the hills and the woods and everything, they are the objectives, which means you actually have to do some manoeuvre and not just sort of sit there and deploy firepower. And I think that really helps mix it up a bit. So there's slightly different ways of capturing objectives and how the terrain interacts with the objectives and so on.
Yeah, and is it the same objectives for both players, or does each player have their own objectives?
It's usually symmetrical, so you'll have to push your object tokens into the enemy half, they'll have to push theirs into yours. Or there's certain number of tokens, and you've both got to get them. So if I think it's always symmetrical objectives. I don't think I've seen sort of where one sort of an attacker-defender type scenario.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds fairly sort of standard. Is it just D6?
Yeah, all D6 based.
All D6. Okay, so we need a handful of D6. We need some tape measures. And we need a nice table with some scenery, and away we go. We've worked out our scenario. We've set our figures up. So we're on to the turn sequence. So, do you want to talk us through the sort of basic turn sequence, how a individual turn works,
right,
and then we can go into each of the sort of phases in turn. Then,
well, the what I want to lead with is say this: it's Kings of War is I go, you go to its logical extreme, where your opponent does nothing in your turn. That is it is a bit of a hurdle to get over when you're sort of coming to it from like Warhammer, especially, but it actually works out quite well in the context of the game, because it's already quite abstract. And because your opponent's not doing anything on your turn, that means that you can play it more like chess, and then the chess clocks come in as being useful.
Yeah, okay, well, so what are the phases for a turn? So let's say we're playing a game, and you've got initiatives, or you get to go first. What are the turns that you would go through?
So first is it's again based on Warhammer. So you start with movement, which is self-explanatory. Then shooting, which also covers magic. There isn't too much magic in the game, but they have been expanding it. Magic tends to be a lot of buffs in it. I think there's only 2 kill spells really. Although in the latest supplement they added a load more, but that's sort of by the by. And then in the third phase of the turn is close combat. If you've charged in the movement phase, then you attack the enemy, then you bounce off, and the next turn, if your opponent's still alive, he's got the option to counterattack. And that is how combat works.
Okay, so fairly straightforward. Okay, so well, I'm intrigued by these chess clocks, so I'm going to ask a question now. So, do you have a chess clock for the whole phase, or do you have it split down for each of those 3 phases?
The chess clock is for the whole game. For sort of a tournament game, 2,000 points, I think the standard seems to be about 50 minutes, including deployment. So, but I think that works really well with the system, because first, as I said, there's nothing your opponent needs to do in your turn apart from consider their next move. But it also actually gives you a bit of time pressure, which means, which I think that is probably I think that's the only sort of I think that's probably the most realistic thing it does, because a lot of the other mechanisms are very abstracted. I think that sort of time pressure thing does really help the game, and it's probably why it's good.
So 50. So that's 50 minutes per player. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So going back to combat then, when you're saying okay, you do nothing in your opponent's turn, so combat is not simultaneous. There is no. You don't even get to roll for defense or anything. You are just hit in your turn.
Yes, your opponent rolls all the dice. It's to hit, to wound, and that's it. Then you roll for nerve, which is where you roll 2 dice, add to the damage you've accumulated on the enemy unit, and see if it beats their nerve value. And if it beats it, they rout. If it equals it within a certain range, they waver and can't do anything much next turn. If you get lower, they're fine. So I think that does lead to a lot of strategies being focused on trying to be able to kill a single unit in a turn by combination of charges.
Yeah.
Which isn't great, but most of the time you'll survive long enough for at least one retaliatory round.
Okay, so that leads me to another question regarding how initiative works. Does initiative work on a simple die roll, or are there more factors involved?
It's just a simple die roll. It's I go, you go, so whoever gets the first turn essentially has the initiative. They do all their movement, all their shooting and all their combat. Then that's the end of their turn.
Right. Can that be affected by their army selection? So, for example, if you choose lighter troops or more cavalry, does that potentially give you any modifiers to your die roll?
Not really. The way it works is you'll roll a dice and choose first or second. And that your choice will normally depend something on your army. If you've got a very shooty army, because sort of maximum missile range is usually 24 inches, and the armies start out 24 inches apart, often you'll let your opponent go first, so they move into bow range on their first turn, then you get to fire back.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's look at movement then. So during the move phase, I bet you guess that you basically pick one of the units. Do you have to sort of give them like an order? Sort of you say, right, I'm going to do this with this unit, or is it sort of fairly free flow on how the movement works?
It's a bit of both. You do give them an order which defines how they can move. There's no order tests or anything. You just say, this is what they're going to do. You've got normal movement, which is move up to their move speed in inches with one pivot of up to 90 degrees. Or you can double, which is double their movement in a straight line. Or then you can sort of sidestep backwards or change facing. If you've moved, that usually is a penalty to fire unless you got sort of a crossbow or a handgun or a slow firing weapon, in which case you have to stand still in order to fire.
And again, do you sort of, because we've got elements, so sort of wheeling or pivoting, do you just sort of pivot on the center or on the front of the unit?
Yes, you pivot on the center of on the geometric center of the unit. It's another of those abstractions that helps with the game, I think, because you don't have to fiddle around with measuring inches on your wheeling.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, I quite like moving like that. Because, I play games there. You need to get a protractor out, to work out how far you can wheel around in a certain turn. So it sounds like they're keeping it fairly simple.
Yes, I think that does help. It's restrictive enough that it sort of feels like you're controlling sort of big blocks of troops in ranks, but it's sort of not, you don't need any geometry equipment to do your movement phase.
Yeah, so that sounds good. And I'm, guessing again that sort of certain terrain is going to reduce movement.
It doesn't reduce movement. It's a bit like Chain of Command. You can't run in woods. You can only sort of move at normal speed. But because normally if you want to move any distance, you'll be moving at double pace anyway, it feels like a reduction in movement.
Right, okay, so it basically forces you to move through difficult terrain at sort of a standard rate.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Again, you say most people are sort of, what unit into penetration? Is that allowed, or do you have to sort of move through a unit?
Your interpenetration is fine, as long as you end up clear of the unit. Sometimes it's not possible, so you can't, and you can't interpenetrate while charging, and obviously you can't interpenetrate your opponent's units, except when you're wheeling. That's like the one exception to the interpenetration rule. When it comes to charging, they acknowledge sort of like that getting two units to line up is a bit difficult. So the charge rules are essentially: can you see the target? Is the distance to your target equal to your movement distance? And can you reasonably wiggle it so that your troops could slide in? Which is the charge rules are pretty complicated, and they have an errata, but
okay,
you got to cover every possible permutation or circumstance.
Oh, okay. So it's not a case of just you have to move by the closest route to engage the target. I mean, do you do things like, do you meet the bases together? Do they sort of slide up so they're both?
Yes, you sort of make everything flush at the end of the charge move.
Okay.
Which does lead to some odd situations. Because this does lead to some odd situations where the way that battle lines can skew a bit, where you sort of, if you charge almost corner to corner, then you have to slide so they're facing, each other to maximise contact.
Yeah, and is that sort of centre to centre, or?
Yeah, more or less. If you another oddity is when you've got two units fighting another unit, because when they're charging, obviously they sort of share the frontage equally. But if the opponent countercharges, they can only countercharge one or the other and not both. So they end up squared against one or the other, which is a bit weird.
Okay.
It's awkward, but it works.
Okay. But you can do it so you can have two units charge against a single unit.
Yes, that's often the best way to sort of like finish off units quickly, especially if you can get a flank or rear charge.
Mm-hmm. And of course, because you're doing all your movement first before the melee combat, it gives you that chance to get in with units. Okay, that's it. And it sounds like they put in some rules there to sort of try to sort of mimic what would happen with the big sort of rank and file units with the sort of wheeling and everything, but they've kept it sort of fairly light so that you're not having to do geometry.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds fair enough.
Yeah, really.
Okay, dokie. Chatted about it.
Yeah, one of the biggest issues with mass combat is always troop maneuver, isn't it? It's and as you say, at the point where you have to start getting the protractors out and kind of going, can my unit actually physically fit through that gap? I mean, interestingly, as far as that's concerned, does these rules include things like zonal control?
No. You can't approach within closer than 1 inch of enemy unit apart from charging, but that's about it.
Oh, right. So yeah, because I mean, normally, because obviously a lot of mass battle games have this thing of once you are within a certain number of inches of an opponent to their front, then you're kind of locked in. There's not a lot you can do. So this doesn't work like that.
No. If you can move there, generally speaking, you can move there.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Thank you.
And can you pre-measure?
Yes, it's that sort of game. The charge distances are fixed, so often you'll ask your opponent how far their unit can move, and you'll move your unit of knights so that they're within charge range, but they can't themselves be charged.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. I've done that a million times. Cool. Okay. So that's movement pretty much done. So what's next? Shooting, isn't it? So, right. So what's the sort of mechanics then for shooting? I'm trying to guess. We got things like, obviously each sort of weapon is going to have modifiers on their distance that they can fire, whether they could be fired with movement and that sort of stuff.
There's sort of different classes of weapon, but generally it's done by individual units. So crossbowmen and sort of longbowmen are different sorts of units. It's not the same unit that you bought crossbows or bows for, and they'll have sort of very special rules. But the basic idea is you'll have a certain number of attack. Oh yeah, your number of shooting attacks is the same as your number of melee attacks. Generally speaking, I mean, for some units, especially war machines, you get more shooting attacks than melee attacks, but that's to be expected, really. You roll a number of dice equal to your melee attack. Your number of attacks, and you compare that to your shoot skill. And low is good because you've got to roll over that, equal to or over that. Yeah, the standard range for everything is usually 24 inches. Some weapons are 12 inches, some weapons are 36, but normally it's going to be 24.
Okay, so you basically, say I've got a unit of bowmen with a shoot value of, say, 6 dice or 6. I would then, number of dice equal to sort of 5 units attack value.
Yeah, so you'd have, say, 8 attacks, and with your shoot value of 6, you'd need to roll 6s to hit.
Righto. And then any modifiers on that with sort of cover or?
There's one for cover, there's one for if you've moved and shot. In the first edition, they had one for long range as well, but I think they got rid of that in the second edition, and I think that's helped a lot because you were always at long range, and so you were always sitting on 6s, which was a bit pants because most troops had a shoot value of 5+.
Yeah. So say your modifiers take you over 6. Is a 6 always a hit?
No. A 1 is always a miss, but if you need a 7 or more to hit, then you roll. You count the 6s and roll them again, and you need to get 4, 5, or 6 again on the second round. I think there's a mechanic similar to that, in fact identical to that, in 5th edition Warhammer, but I haven't played any of the more recent Warhammer, so I couldn't tell you if it's in those.
Yeah, I've seen that mechanic before, and that sounds fairly good. Okay, you roll the number of dice, you know what your modifiers are, you count the number of hits. What then happens? Then
you look at your opponent's stats, and they've got a defense value, and this time higher is better, and it's the number you've got to roll equal to or over. This can be modified by the weapon you're using. If it's got the piercing rule, then you add +1 or +2 if it's a very piercing weapon like gunpowder. And for every dice you roll that beats their defense, that counts as that's a wound, and they sort of record that next to the unit. Normally using like dice. I like polyhedral dice because they're obviously not D6s. But you've got people with like trays or counters or tokens.
Right, so that's beating their value as opposed to equaling or beating.
Sorry, equally or beating. Sorry.
So I was just wondering because obviously because it's equal or beat on the hit roll, I was just wondering whether it was the same mechanic or whether it was different. But yeah, okay, so it's the same mechanic. Thanks.
Yes, it is the same. I didn't explain very well.
No, that do quite well. Yeah, it sounds fairly standard. It's just that classic roll to hit.
Yep.
And then roll to do damage, and because it's element based, you're recording the number of damage, and then obviously each element has a certain number of damage you can take before something bad happens. You mentioned this testing of nerve.
Yes. You do this at the end of the shooting phase if you've inflicted wounds on a unit, or at the end of the close combat phase if you've inflicted wounds on a unit. You can't shoot into close combat, so you'll never roll 2 nerve checks for the same unit in the same turn. The way the nerve check works is you roll 2 dice, you add the accumulated total of wounds they've got on them, and you compare that to a stat called the nerve of the unit. This usually comes 2 numbers, a wavering and a rout. if you beat their wavering but not their rout value with your 2d6 plus wounds, that means that they are wavering, as the name suggests, and the unit stays there, but they can't really do anything next turn. I mean, some special rules mean they can, but normally they can just move backwards, left or right, or pivot, and that's all.
Right.
If you roll have no route value, then that's gone. The unit just removed from the table.
Yeah. Okay.
It's nice and simple.
Yeah, no, they've definitely gone for the, keep it simple and have fun game.
Yeah. It's nice, and you can actually get a little subtlety in the nerve, because for larger units, the numbers tend to be higher because obviously they've got a lot more bodies, but also it can represent a more disciplined but smaller units. One of the interesting things is like the difference between the waver and the rout values, because some troops, they can be wavered quite easily, but it's then more difficult to finally rout them, and that can sort of have its own different effects because they're standing in the way of your own troops or standing in the way of the enemy's troops.
Yeah, that's quite subtle. So it's not always the same value difference between wavering and
Yes.
rout. It's different. Oh, that's quite interesting. Once you're in a wavering condition, do you remain in that wavering condition until
Until the end of your turn.
The end of the turn. Okay, so you go to wavering, and then the next turn, if you take more hits or take more damage, you would then do another roll.
Yes.
And in that case, you may be fine, you may be wavering, or you might be.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Sometimes if you get a lucky nerve roll, especially because double 1 on a nerve roll is always no effect. Double 6 is always a wavering, even if you don't beat their nerve value. And that's another nice little rule. It just adds a bit more variety to the game, so it's not completely predictable. And I think in every game, there's usually one moment where you roll double 1 for the nerve, and that throws your plan out of kilter somewhat.
Because double 1 would be bad.
Yes, because that means the unit stays regardless.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. What's the next? Melee. So, is it a similar sort of mechanic as sort of shooting?
Yeah, more or less. You've got modifiers to hit based on if you've charged through terrain, although that goes away on sort of the subsequent rounds.
Yeah.
Which is quite nice the way they do that. It works much the same as shooting, except instead of using your shoot value, you use your melee value, and then the modifier to the wound roll is called crushing strength rather than piercing, but it is essentially the same mechanic. It's even the same number of attacks.
Okay, and do you get sort of bonuses for hitting units in the flank or rear?
Yes, it's quite simple. You just double the number of dice if you hit them in the flank. Double the number of attack dice if you hit them in the flank, or triple the number of attack dice if you hit them in the rear. I think it's quite a nice way of getting across the whole nerve concept, because the wounds that you're inflicting, it's sort of a combination of physical damage and psychological damage. And obviously, being hit in the flank is very concerning. Hence, why you get the big bonus. It's nice. It works together well like that.
Yeah, it's quite nice that they're keeping the attack value, so the number of dice you roll is always going to be the same, unless you're obviously going to attack in the rear or the flank. But what is the difference is on the modifiers you're going to have, depending whether you're in cover or whether whatever the modifiers are.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, damaging, he's done the same. Test and nerve has done the same. Okay. Like you did say that once you've charged in, made an attack, you break combat then, don't you, straight away?
Yes, your unit is bounced back an inch, and then that's the end of your turn. So, in order to continue the fight, your opponent has to declare a charge, which is known as a counter charge and has slightly different rules. Like, if your opponent charged through a wood, they would be hindered on their first charge, but on your counter charge, you're not hindered. Because that's just the nature of the beast. But on the other hand, if you've got a unit of lance-armed cavalry, they don't get their lance bonuses if they're counter-charging, if they've taken damage in the previous turn.
Okay, because they haven't got
the momentum.
Yeah, the momentum to get up to speed.
Yeah. Although, if your opponent charges you but doesn't deal damage, then you do get your lance bonus, and then it's going to be a load of fun for you.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm kind of guessing that, well, as soon as you use the term cavalry and lancers, it's never good for the defender.
Yeah.
Okay, so, I mean, that's pretty much a standard turn. It all sounds nice and simple, fun. So, the fantasy elements that we like to see, because at the moment, we're basically talking about a sort of medieval battle.
Yes.
So when it comes to fantasy, we're looking at things like magic. What else we got? Flying things, big war engines.
All present and correct.
Lovely stuff.
So you've already mentioned kind of that they basically simplified magic into the fact that magic is a form of shooting attack. Yeah.
Yes. However, they've got a load of really interesting permutations on what a spell can do. So it's a shooting attack, but if it's a heal spell, say, you target that against a friendly unit, and any hits remove wounds from that unit. The other interesting spell is Surge. It used to be for necromancers moving skeletons and undead units only, but it's since been expanded to sort of all sorts of constructs like golems, constructy type things, and treants, or ents, or what they're called forest shamblers in this because of copyright reasons.
Fair enough, yeah.
Yes. And that sort of has its own thing because that means the unit moves in the shooting phase. Because magic is in the shooting phase. So the classic tactic for the undead army is you'll move your unit, then turn it so that it's facing the enemy's flank, and then cast a surge spell, which gets you a sneaky flank charge.
Actually, this brings on to another question. We're talking about magic. Does this mean that, as well as the big element units, that do you have single characters?
Yes, you can have sort of both single monster type characters, but also sort of single characters on foot or on horse. They don't tend to have very powerful attacks, but they're useful for things like spell casting. Also for a thing called Inspiring, which is means you force your opponent to re-roll successful nerve tests. That is, if he's routed your unit, you can force them to re-roll, which gives them a chance to fail and thus preserve your unit.
Right.
Okay, so these individual units, are they attached to?
No, they are. You never see a unit as a hero inside a block of troops like you would in Warhammer. They're all free roaming.
Okay.
So can they be attacked and targeted by a unit of troops?
Yes, it's a penalty to shoot at them, unless they're riding a monstrous mount or something. But there's no restrictions on charging. And if you leave sort of a wee little battle standard bearer in front of your unit as a screen, if your opponent wipes them out, then they can get a free move and fight another round of combat if they contact your unit behind the individual.
Right, so there are rules in there for the let's just say the slightly bearded use of individual models.
Yeah, you can't sort of have a skirmish screen of standard bearers in front of your archers.
I like the idea, though.
Because, of course, who would ever think of such a thing? Yes.
Actually, again, this brings us on to things like the use of light troops, shield, and heavier troops. is that a mechanic? Can light troops evade if they're charged? Can they?
No. I think this is one of the things that I'm a little disappointed about, is that there's really not any skirmishing that you can do. Probably the closest thing you'd get is sort of having a light, cheap unit deploying in front of yours to block line of sight so the units behind can't be shot at, but also to make sure the opponent charges them, wipes them out in a turn, but then you can countercharge and be in range. So that's the only real advantage they offer. I mean, you can sort of imagine it as sort of, the troops as sort of the skirmishers scattering when charged and sort of leaving the enemy open for a counterattack. But mechanically, there's no way of doing any evasion.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so what else have we got that we need to talk about? We talked about individuals. I'm kind of guessing things like war engines, cannons, all that is.
Yeah.
They'll all be in there.
Yeah, there's plenty of sort of big, monstrous, giant type beasties. There's a not steam tank in dwarven and halfling flavors.
Oh, halfling steam tank, you say?
Yes. Oh, there's also chaos dwarves, but they don't have a steam tank. But they do have a lot of artillery.
Someone needs to tell Mr. Hickman about the Hobbit's steam tank.
Mm-hmm.
he will like that. Okay, I'm kind of guessing that with these army lists, it'll tell you the sort of the size of the unit,
yes,
their attack values, and you mentioned special rules as well. So is there lots of sort of different little special rules that again give you that sort of fantasy element?
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of modifying rules, like as I've mentioned, crushing strength and piercing. They sort of represent troops with big weapons, or that are very strong, or that have gunpowder weapons, or that sort of thing. There's also flying. Flying is one of the things that's been progressively reined in as the over the years of tournament gaming. And now it's something that you can lose quite easily, but that's only because it offers a lot of advantages. Like you can fly behind someone and then you can't be charged, and then you can sort of charge them in the rear. If you play your cards right, you can have sort of flying creatures with long movement swooping in to jump characters and war machines who are sort of a bit behind the front line, and that sort of thing.
Okay, so they're trying to rein that in a bit.
Yes. I don't. Despite the fact I've been to tournaments, I've never noticed this. I've never really noticed the effect of that per se, because I don't use flying units and I'm not very good. So, yeah.
Well, that's a nice overview of the sort of basic rules. Winning the game, I kind of guess it's objective based. Is it turn based as well? Or
yes.
Do you play? It is turn based.
Yeah, it is turn based. There's 6 turns, and at the end of the 6th turn, you roll a dice, and there's a 50 chance whether there's a 7th turn or not.
Right. So.
And I have had games where, if I had another turn, I would have won, but it was in a draw. And other games when there's not been another turn, and I've avoided losing and got a draw instead. So it's a nice little thing that sometimes you want a turn, sometimes you don't.
With the chess clock sense, so what happens if you run out of time on, say, turn 5?
Then your opponent, you can't then do anything for your turn 6. So your opponent can take turn 5, and I think they can take turn 6 as well if they've got time.
When they've got time.
Oh no, sorry, I tell a lie. If you run out of time, all your units rout, so you're removed from the board, and the game more or less ends there. I think if your opponent hasn't taken their turn 5 yet, then they can still move to grab objectives. But there's no turn 6. That's the end of the game.
I do like the chess clock idea. I must say that does appeal to me.
Indeed, that is a very interesting aspect. I mean, obviously, yeah. So you have this, you have this interesting yeah, it's an interesting dynamic because I suppose always one of the cause, I think they talked about using chess clocks a lot in the war in Warhammer tournament games. And of course, the issue there was there was always a complaint about your opponent, because you've obviously got like counter attacks and stuff. That actually you can potentially lose time because your opponent is taking time during your turn due to their counter attacks.
Yes, I think the I go you go system in Kings of War, whilst it is a bit extreme, it does make the chess clock gameplay much more viable.
Yes,
I think that's more of an advantage than it seems at first. I think.
Yeah, I can see what they're trying to do. Yeah. All right. We've covered the sort of basics of the rules and the army creation. So let's chat about the fluff. You said that they've got their own background.
Yes. If you're familiar with the Warhammer Fantasy fluff, you'll pick up a few you'll pick up a few similarities.
Yeah.
Although, sorry.
I was just going to say it's a semi-medieval style game with magic.
Yes.
Yeah. With the usual archetypes in there.
Yes, I like some of the little things they've done. Like they've got the not Roman Empire has fallen, and there's also a not Byzantine Empire still going, and they're sort of the only human faction with a model range produced by Mantic.
So that's the Basilians, yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. So, what armies are there around for this game? Oh, look.
I think they've got one for all the Warhammer factions. So you've got your elves in. You've only got two flavors of elves: high elf, stroke wood elves, and dark elves. They've got a dark elf list, but I think they're still working on the fluff for that because I think they haven't worked a way they're happy with yet. So they've got a list but no model range or anything. Then they've got dwarves and what would be called chaos dwarves, except they're called abyssal dwarves because it's not Warhammer. For evil, you've sort of got three sort of main lexes. You've got your undead. There's an undead one. There's also a Tomb Kingsy one for more Egyptian-themed armies. But
that's the Empire of Dust, isn't it?
Yes. Then you've got the Abyss, which is classical demon sort of things. And there's an actual big hole in the ground that's on fire where all the Abyssals come from and do all their wonderful things with the pitchforks. And then you've got the Varangur, who I mentioned earlier. They fill the same role of Chaos Warriors, in that they're in the north and they've got big spiky armor. But they're slightly different. That they're an evil faction that hates the Abyss. So they did a sort of a grand world campaign last year. Was it last year or 2 years ago? I think it might have been 2 years ago now, where the Varangur were counted as on the good side because they were fighting against the Abyss, which was the main antagonist. That was an interesting point of fluff there.
Cool. What else we got? Night Stalkers, Ogres, Orcs, Salamanders.
Yeah. Salamanders, that's your lizard man types. Salamanders also crop up in the Forces of Nature, which is actually, I think that's fairly unique. Have you ever played Heroes of Might and Magic?
No.
No.
I think I would look at the rules.
It's a computer game, so it's not strictly relevant. But anyway, in that game, and also in this, you've got sort of an army composed of earth, air, water, and fire elementals, plus forest spirits and the aforementioned salamanders. There are a lot more armies of this, because then you've got the Trident Realms, which are underwater themed, and have got sort of legged merfolk with legs. as their main sort of troops.
Yeah.
And also lots of water elementals. There's a good faction based on Bretonia, which is the Brotherhood, who are focused on knights, but they're more sort of an independent crusading organisation than sort of a nation, roughly speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. They've got Rat Folk. They've got a sort of Beastman meets the Chronicles of Narnia faction called the Herd, who don't have any models, but I think there was recently a Kickstarter for Fawns, so you can get models. I think they've got some. Mantic do have some Centaur models at least.
Mm.
And then there's the faction called Night Stalkers, who play differently, in that rather than having any inspiring creatures of their own, they're inspired by their opponents' inspiring creatures. And they've just got some models released as part of Kings of War Vanguard, which is the skirmish version of the rules, which I think uses D8s, but I've not played it. So
Cool. So there's lots of choice there. I think they've been quite good as well with letting people sort of go to their tournaments using armies produced by other manufacturers as well, haven't they?
Yes, they've been very good for that. I think partly because it's that they saw that they wanted to capitalise on the collapse of Warhammer. If you go in with an army not made by Mantic, in an official tournament you won't win. You probably won't win the painting prize. I think that's for unofficial tournaments. That's Mantic armies only.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're perfectly happy to have you bring more or less any models by any manufacturer, which is great because again the humans don't really have a model range in Mantic apart from Basilians, and they don't cover the full range of human units like the more generic human armies. There's two human factions. There's Humans Only, which is much more historical based with a few wizards, and one that's clearly based on the Empire from Warhammer Fantasy, which is humans and halflings who supply the steam tanks I mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, what about things like campaigns within a campaign system? Is that in the rules?
I think there is some campaign rules online. I've read them and they look quite interesting. It's basically sort of a way to string games together, and winning a game will get you a small but not necessarily overwhelming advantage in your next game. But as I said, I've not played that, and I've not seen much support for that. I think most of it seems to be the tournament-based rules, rather than fluff-based, particularly.
So ultimately, what do you like? Well, especially considering they're your most played rules, what do you like about them? What do you like, and especially what attracted to you in the first place, and what do you really like about the rules?
What attracted me to them in the first place was that they were free. The basic rules are free, as with like some basic army lists that don't have all the units available. They're free online from the Mantic website still. Yeah, that's always very attractive. What got me to stay, I think it's just that you can make more or less any fantasy army with using a mixture of army lists, allies, and counts as models.
Yeah. And
generally speaking, it's no matter what you choose, it's easy to make a balanced army that can stand on its own, even if you don't win tournaments. Like I don't think that list choice is the main reason why I do so badly in tournaments. The other thing I like is that it's got a very good competitive scene, which I think is helped by the old chess clock format.
Yeah.
And I think the rules themselves aren't great as rules individually, but once you have the chess locks element, it all begins to lock together, and the I Go You Go turns it into more of a chess game than sort of a simulation.
Yeah.
And I think that works best for fantasy because, in generic fantasy, how is an elf supposed to act? There's so many different elven tropes out there that often the best thing to do is just sort of have a general catch-all set that covers most bases fairly well, but doesn't go into the specifics. And people say, "Oh, they've done elves wrong. I'm not playing this." Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why I haven't really touched Kings of War Historical, because to my mind, I think it wouldn't feel. I think it wouldn't feel quite. Yeah, it wouldn't feel quite. Yeah, it wouldn't really capture the essence of the period, which is what I'd be looking for. But if you want a historical game with a simple set of rules, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, because we haven't chatted about the historical thing, so I'm just looking at it here. So the historical book was 20 quid, and you got the core Kings of War rules, and 30 army lists from antiquity to late Middle Ages. So yeah, this covers the usual stuff, and yeah, I can see why they did it, because you take any sort of fantasy rules, take away the magic and the flying and the steam tanks, and you've got a historical game there.
Mm.
So yeah, it sort of makes sense. The rules themselves. The second edition gamer's rulebook's only £15. So you're not looking at a huge investment, especially if you've got figures there, and especially as it's element based as well.
Yeah.
As long as you stick to the basic sizes, you get a game in. So tournaments, because you've done a few tournaments, haven't you?
Yes. Let's see. I've gone to sort of a couple of independent ones, and I took the range. I've done to 3 so far. One of which was a very independent. It was running a church to raise funds for their roof, which had been stolen. And I've done that sort of through a group that are very keen on Kings of War, and they sort of run their own tournaments, to the official Mantic tournament for Kings of War. And my experience has been pretty even across all of them, really.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, I've never done a tournament. It's not something that's ever appealed to me. Neil, you've done a few new sort of things, so.
Well, ish. Yeah.
Yeah. Ish. Yeah, so what's the sort of general format of them? It's sort of four games a day or 3 games in a day?
3 or 4 games a day. If it's a 2-day tournament, it's probably going to be 3 rather than 4, so people aren't completely exhausted.
Yeah.
These will be about hour and a half of playing the game with the chess clocks, and that sort of includes the setting up. You deploy on the clock as well, and in the latest tournament, it was very exciting because you set up the terrain on the clock as well. And there was obviously a bit of nuance in there, because I was keen to put a few woods in the middle so that my Beastman troops could go through there. Whereas other people might want to put them out of the way to clear line of sight for their archers or whatever.
Mm. Okay, so it's sort of on chessboard. So, it's sort of points based for a win, a lose, and then are they sort of round robin, or is it sort of Swiss?
It's a Swiss system. The scoring is usually the first criterion is the scenario, so whether you've achieved the objectives or not, which is your victory points for objectives. Then that's usually modified by the kill points of units that you've routed. That gives you final score, and then they do a Swiss system based on that.
Yeah. Ah, cool. So, what are the other sort of players like? Are they sort of a nice bunch of guys, girls?
Yeah, I've been pretty impressed by the community. I even went to one tournament wearing a skirt, and no one batted an eye. So, it's very inclusive. Some of the people aren't white men.
Good.
Yeah, I know.
Cool. How big is the Kings of War community as far as a bunch of gaming group people?
It's hard to say because and it's international certainly because there's a US Masters and a UK Masters, and I think one of the prizes in each is to sort of a ticket to the other. Although you have to pay your own plane fare, I think.
That's a bit disappointing.
Yeah.
Oh, why don't you to the US? Yeah, hang on a minute. Can I have just spare several $100s?
There. Cool. So, what's the best way into this game? If somebody wanted to jump in, is there you can get the books? Obviously, you can get the armies off Mantic. Is there like a starter set or?
There is a starter set which is there was a starter set that was dwarves versus undead, where you get sort of the basic rule book and enough for a small army of each. There's a starter army for all of the Mantic factions, or you can sort of if you've already got a fantasy army, you can almost certainly convert that into Kings of War.
Yeah, I do notice they also sell just movement trays, don't they? Which I'm assuming are the unit footprints.
Yes.
Yeah, they've got it all covered, haven't they? You got to give Mantic that year. They do this stuff well.
Mm-hmm.
I must admit, I'm particularly impressed by their proxy rule. Because that's not something you tend to find with companies that have that produce a game that has its own miniatures. So I know there was a particular reason behind why they did it. But even so, it's unusual to find.
Yes, I think another part of the reason is that it's nice for it's good for people who don't want to buy Mantic armies, but then because you've got a larger player base, it means that there are more players for the people who have bought Mantic armies to play against. So it sort of encourages them to stay with the hobby.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be said. Some of the Mantic armies that they have produced are, well, they have gone down particular, shall we say, styles and designs which people may find not to their liking. I think their elves look a bit weird, and I was particularly disappointed with their dwarves.
Yes, I think the elves are a bold design choice, but they look alien certainly. But I agree, yeah, they're not really my style of elves or dwarves, really.
No. I mean, interesting because the owls are almost, for want of a better phrase, they're almost Melambonian in style in some ways. It was a very it was considering again it's one of these things. I suppose it's a case of it's a different considering the amount of Alva models you have on the market. It was interesting that they basically came along and did something slightly different.
Yeah, give it due for that.
Well, it's both a good and a bad thing, but certainly as you look through the Mantic range of models, they have actually got some really interesting stuff in there, and some really interesting choices, especially when you, as I say, when you start going along things like the forces of the abyss and the elementals and forces of nature and stuff like that. Got some it's stuff that you don't see a lot of elsewhere, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like a fun game. Would it be a game that I would play? I'm not sure because I'm not a big fan of Aggro Yugo, but
I must admit that the whole Aggro Yugo, especially on the combat. At the point where combat is, it's basically I do everything to you, and then if you survive on your turn, you can do something back to me. It's, I think we were talking about another game that was another Bass Battle game that is launched, and the one major issue we had with it is essentially this lack of jeopardy during close combat. If you initiate close combat, or somebody would have it, if you win initiative in close combat, you've won. You know, unless you completely duff your dice rolls up, you will cause massive damage to the opposition, and you will win that combat. And it seemed the point of it was all based on initially whether you had initiative or not.
Yeah.
So that's, I must admit, that is the one thing that really that is an alarm bell for me.
Yeah.
Even with what else you've described, George, that's the one thing I'm kind of thinking. Not sure.
Yeah. However, I do like the idea of this chess clock idea. I like that time element, and as George has said, it all fits together well. And I think you just got to look at it as a game, not as a simulation. And there's nothing wrong with games being games. So.
Yes, I quite agree. I think what I'm saying is, I think Kings of War it takes I Go, You Go to its logical extreme. So if you don't like I Go, You Go, you really won't like Kings of War.
Yeah.
But I at least like what it does with the concept, and it makes it sort of part of the game in its own way, which is nice.
Yeah, because in the bad old days when I Go, You Go was all you had, it was because it's all it was the mechanic that everybody used. And I know Henry would be jumping up and I'm going, no, but actually John Feverson did this. But anyway, but yeah, I like the idea that they've taken this mechanic and went, okay, well, we're going to do this, and this is why we're going to do it, because it's going to be a perfect game for a tournament. Shove in the chess clock, you've got 15 minutes. You know exactly how long those games are going to last. You can plan your games around that, because I've umpired games where we gave a time limit, and some players were just eking out the time so they could get a draw. And when you've got a certain amount of time to do what you want to do for the whole battle, it makes you think. So, yeah. It's nice to look at it with a fresh set of eyes. So I'm glad you come on, George, to chat about King's War, because, I purposely haven't looked at it. I'm intrigued by it, which is not a bad state to be in.
Yeah, I think my advice if you were sort of jumping in, obviously the first few games you're going to be consulting the rules so much that you might have to pause the chess clock a lot. But I think if you want to give this game a go, I would definitely advise getting a chess clock up on your phone. I got one for free, so it's not really much of an expense. And that is, I think, the best way to experience the game under time pressure.
Mm.
Yeah, that's all I can say, really. The time pressure thing, I think, is what makes the game work.
And do you enjoy playing it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think recently, my recent tournament experience, I had the most pleasant tabling I've ever received in a game, where I was completely wiped out, but I felt I'd achieved something nonetheless.
Great under pressure.
And interestingly, this was an army. This was a game where I was fighting against an army with 4 giants, and it didn't feel gratuitous.
Just 4 giants.
And obviously supporting troops, because you can't just buy a giant on itself. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but it was perfectly. It was a perfectly tournament legal army. It was fun to play against. It was a different experience, because the giants obviously they take damage and in a slightly different way to a normal unit, and also they've got a slightly different number of attacks. The difference in profile isn't that great, but actually once you come to play against it, you realise that it does make a difference. Because the only difference between, say, a giant and a unit of troops is that a giant's got a lot of crushing strength, but it's also got quite a high nerve, that's sort of in between, that's sort of almost like Horde's sort of a 40 strong unit's nerve, but not quite. But that's still significantly more than a 20 strong unit, and so it ends up feeling a different unit, despite the fact that it's got the same defense as a unit of heavy cavalry.
Got another giant. Do you like a giant?
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm just looking at digital chess clocks on eBay. They're really, because obviously you say, right, you can do one on your phone. There's always that very satisfying thing of looking at a clock and then going ding on the buttons. But you can get digital ones for between £12 and £13.
I have been about buying a chess clock. It is much better, and then you've got your phone free to take photos.
That's it.
That's true.
That's it. So yes, intriguing. Thank you, George.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Yeah, no problem.
Right, okay. So on that note, I think what we'll do is we will take a quick break, and when we come back, it's time to wrap things up. Right, okay, so that is Kings of War. Did we say, I mean, I know we talked about the how much the historical and the version 2 rules are. Are they still available to download for free?
The basic rules are still available for download.
But that's just the basic rules, it doesn't include the army lists and stuff.
They've got some basic army lists as well. It doesn't have the full range of troops. If you just want to try it, you can.
Right, got you.
Maybe 1,000 points worth, just whatever units you can lay hands on.
Yeah, sure. Cool, excellent stuff. Right, so before we go, it is of course that time of the show where we talk about what Dave bought this week. And whilst the main theme of the show has of course been Kings of War, there has been another small underlying theme, and that of mechs. And I was chatting to Mr. Hickman the other day, and he turned around and said, "Oh, I've had a new game turn up," which is now Dave is a fan of the Tiny Epic series, and the last one happens to be the latest one happens to be Tiny Epic Mechs.
Right, this is card games, isn't it? Tiny Epic stuff.
No, these are board games.
Okay, board.
Now, they are in various formats. But basically, the idea is that they fit into into like a 6-inch by 4-inch by inch deep box sort of thing. But yes, Tiny Epic Mechs is the latest one, which apparently turned up this week. It is available to purchase. It is indeed mech combat, 1 to 4 players, and you effectively seem to have like these arm up with stuff, or then stick into different mech bodies, and then stick weaponry on the mech bodies. And this one, it's stylized, so it's basically like arena combat by the look of things. Yes. Now the Tiny Epic series and you also have programmed actions.
Ooh.
So that is always likely to cause absolute chaos. So everybody has 4 actions, and you have programmed actions. 4 programmed actions per turn, which can obviously I suspect that's going to be absolute chaos. If you haven't come across the Tiny Epic game series, basically they're designed to be kind of smaller games in a box. The game design concepts are very, very good. They're just slightly lower grade on the gaming components, or slightly small, which can be a bit awkward for those of us who are somewhat challenged in eyesight. For example, we played we recently played Tiny Epic Zombies, which again, Tiny Epic Zombies is just you are playing. It's not Evil Dead. It's the first one. Day of the Dead. Yeah. So
right.
Yeah. So basically, you're defending a shopping mall. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the only issue with the Tiny Epic game is the fact that the printing on the they're using printed cards for each area, and so the printing on the cards can be a little bit small for those of us whose eyes have seen better days. But other than that, the whole Tiny Epic series is very good. But as I say, the latest one, Tiny Epic Mechs, which looks incredibly silly, and I'm assuming Dave got this on the Kickstarter, so it's got all these extra. Basically, it's all these extra plastic bits that you stick on for extra weaponry.
Yeah,
I'm sure, Mr.
fun.
Hobbs, when we see you in a couple of weeks, we might get a chance to have a game at that at some point. Yeah, cool.
Yes,
So that's what. So I don't believe Dave has bought anything else this week, or at least if he has, he hasn't told me about it yet. Yes. So that's it. Cool. Here we are. As I say, end of the show. Okay, one last thing before we say goodbye to George. Just want to give a huge shout out to Matt and Debs. Matt and Deb Slade. Just want to say hi, guys. Thinking about you lots. And hopefully get a chance to see you soon. So, George, thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope it hasn't been too unpleasant an experience.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, I'd do it again.
Excellent stuff. Well, in that case, then.
Yeah. Start thinking of a subject. Yeah.
That's it. So we really appreciate you coming on and chatting to us about a subject that we literally knew very little about. So it's great to go on and sharing your hobby with us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a patron. Really appreciate it. And at the same time, if you've listened to this show and you fancy coming on, then George was a patron of the show, and we have a quarterly prize draw. And the winner of which, or some would say the loser of which, has the pleasure of coming on and recording with us. So, if you'd like to be the next George Holt, then simply make sure you're backing us on Patreon at the $3 level. And next time, it could be you.
Yeah, you're really unlucky.
Indeed. Yes. So, all the things we said, say, George, thank you very much. We really appreciate your contribution. Mr. Hobbs, thank you as always.
Thank you, Neil. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you to the Meeps. Thank you to everybody for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the show and found it useful. Obviously, anything that's raised, questions that are raised, and then please let us know, and we'll do our best to follow up on that. So until next time, all the most you said is happy gaming, and we will speak to you in a couple of weeks.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, why not share it with others by leaving us a review on iTunes? And if you have any comments or questions, you can always email the show. The address is info@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. And you can also visit our webpage, where you'll find a complete episode archive, all the View from the Veranda podcasts, rules reviews, and our blog of hobby items and news, which is updated several times a week. This is also where you'll find the links to our presence on social media, and here you can follow us on Twitter or join our Facebook group. And finally, here you can also find details should you wish to support us by making a donation to the podcast. All this on the Meeples and Miniatures website, www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 3.0 Unported license. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.